Hey guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped. Now then, would you believe it is now 7 weeks since I collected the Hyundai Tucson self-charging hybrid behind me from Hendy's in Poole. Honestly can't believe that time has gone that quickly. I've just been so busy with so many things on, I haven't had the opportunity to film my first review of the car. So in this video, I'm going to combine two things: a review of the car and my general impressions from 7 weeks of ownership and best part of 2,000 miles of driving. Now then, before we get looking at the car, obvious statement time. That is a self-charging hybrid, so no need for one of these or even just a 3-pin granny charger, unlike the Kia Sorento plug-in hybrid that I had before the Tucson. And one of the things I want to explore in this video is that difference between the two types of hybrid: plug-in hybrid, self-charging hybrid. Seems obvious, but plenty to talk about. Now, let me show you around some of my favourite features of the Tucson. Now, first thing I want to say about this car is I think it's a really good looking car. And no offence, Hyundai, but it's miles better looking than the car it replaced, which, let's face it, wasn't really a looker. But I like this car because it's interesting and different and quirky. So I'm going to talk you around the outside, some of my favourite features. There's a couple of things I'm not so keen on as well. Then we'll jump inside and have a look at the interior, which again is a massive step change for Hyundai in terms of quality and fit out. We'll have a chat about practicality, and then we'll take you for a drive up my favourite bit of road around here, and we'll talk about what it's like to drive and the experiences I've had in it in the couple of thousand miles I've done. First up though is the front end, because I think the front end is cool. And why is it cool? Look at that grille. I love it because you can't actually tell where the headlights are. They are basically in these 4 pieces down here, and they just meld into the front grille. Now, I must admit, one of the challenges with having cars in the summertime is I haven't actually driven this car in the dark, so I can't tell you what these headlights are like in terms of enabling you to see at night time. It was the same for the Kia Sorento. Someone asked, what are the headlights like on the Sorento? I said, well, simply, I don't know, because I didn't drive it at night time. You've also got some more auxiliary lights down here. But just the front end of the car is just different. I've not seen another car like it. It's not the easiest front end to keep clean. You get lots of squashed bugs and flies, and these kind of grille is a little bit complicated to keep clean. But I like it. It's different. It's quirky. Very cool. Let's head round the side of the car. There's something around the side I love and something I'm really not that keen on. Now, I do like the side profile of the new Tucson. I like the aggressive lines around the front and rear wheels. I love these creases in the bodywork. It's an interesting kind of thing. I can imagine it's not for everybody, and I really love the rear 3/4 as we come up here, these details around the lights. So side profile wise, I think it's spot on. The bit I'm not so keen on, and interestingly it's the same kind of body styling as my Mini, is these black or kind of dark grey plastics on the sills and around the wheel arches, because they are a nightmare to keep clean. This is a new car and I'm already struggling to keep them clean. I did, however, on my travels, see an N-line specification Tucson with these in the body colour, which looked really smart actually, and I think if I was opting for one of these, I would be very tempted with doing that. But side profile wise, love it. Really like the wheel design as well. Let's take a wander around the back, because things get even better at the back of the car. So I like the front. I'm really keen on the side profile, but for me, my favourite view of the new Tucson is this rear view. I just think it's on the money. As I've mentioned, I love this kind of little bit of brushed aluminium detailing here, but I love the rear tail lights, the way this Hyundai badges into the kind of rear glass. I love the little exhaust exit there. It just looks smart and neat and new and fresh. I like it a lot. But the big question is, how big is the boot? And can you get 2 dogs in it? Yes, I think we can. Hello, you two. So yes, safe to say you can get 2 dogs in the back of this. In fact, we were on holiday last week. We got 4 schnauzers in this boot. So there's loads and loads of room in here for pups. There's plenty of room in here. I haven't tried to get my bike in, but I'm pretty confident I'd be able to get my bike in. I'd probably need to take the front wheel off. Again, that's just because I've got a rather large frame size and a very high saddle. But yeah, loads and loads of room. Would you 2 girls like to go and play? Go on. So yes, loads of room. There's also a really nice underfloor storage area as well. You can drop the seats down. They split 3 different ways. It's just a super practical little car, this. But how much leg room is there in the back for the human occupants? We've seen that pups will fit. Let's see if I will. So first up, compared with the Sorento, clearly the Tucson's a smaller car, so the legroom in here is a little bit less, but it's still pretty impressive, to be honest, and this seat's a long way back. Now, you can sit 3 passengers in this rear compartment. However, I'd really say there are 2 main seats. This middle seat is more of an emergency seat, and the seat belt's actually in the roof. I've never seen one of these before. There are 2 clips in the middle, and you basically clip it in like that, or like, yeah, like that, definitely. Luckily, there's instructions, but yeah, I've never seen that before. So yeah, I think 2 adults, definitely in comfort. 3 if it was an emergency journey. You've got a little kind of drinks holder and armrest. You've got air conditioning. You've got a couple of USB chargers. It's super comfy in here. If it gets too sunny, you've even got a pull-up sun blind. And this full-length panoramic roof gives you lots and lots of light. But for me, the interior of this car, we need to get in the front because that's where it starts to get really interesting. Now then, I'm going to say something a little bit controversial here. Hyundai interiors of the past weren't that great. They were filled with kind of cheap end materials, lots of scratchy plastics. The ergonomics weren't necessarily that great, and the technology wasn't particularly great either. And they certainly weren't somewhere where I'd sit and go, oh, this is a really nice interior, I'd like to do lots and lots of miles. That, my friends, that is the past. This interior is right up there for me. It's got lots of premium materials in it. These seats look great. They're very, very comfortable. The steering wheel has a beautiful leather covering, and it just feels nice in the hand. The dash looks great. It's not horrible scratchy plastics. It's got this lovely kind of speaker material running around the top. Lots of gloss black trim. Bit of a magnet for fingerprints, but on the whole it's just a really, really nice place. Now, this is the top spec Tucson, so it's got lots and lots of toys in it. Let me just fire the car up and all of the displays will come to life, and you get lots of bings and bongs, which are a little bit annoying. One of the things, so you've got everything driven by this touch screen there. Now, you do have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Sadly, you need a wire, so I've just been plugging in my iPhone, and then you fire up Apple CarPlay and away you go. And I drive everything through that pretty much. So there are some, well, they're real buttons, but they're not. They're kind of the flat haptic type buttons along here. I've got a range of buttons down here. Now, really nicely, these seats are both heated and cooled, so they've got vented cooled seats. It's really quite amusing. Mrs. Petrol doesn't like them at all. And then the one thing I'm not a big fan of is the controls to put the car into its different driving gears, so forward, reverse and neutral. I would much rather have some kind of gear stick or gear lever rather than just these buttons. I'm not a big fan at all. You kind of almost have to get into the habit of, when you select a gear, you just need to make sure you check the dash to make sure it's in that gear before you move off, because it's quite easy to either not be in the gear you want, be in neutral when you think you're in a drive gear. It also sometimes has a bit of a div because you'll put it in drive, and if the parking brake isn't off, it won't move, and you move the parking brake to the off position and it still doesn't move, and it just confuses itself sometimes. It's a self-charging hybrid, so you'll hear the engines just fired up, and we'll talk more about that when we get out and about driving. But all in all, as a cabin, it's a really, really super place to be. It's got all the toys that I would want, and I like it a great deal. So I think we get some cameras set up and we take it for a bit of a drive, because the drivetrain in this car, this plug-in hybrid, a relatively small petrol engine and an electrical hybrid system, and apologies for that, because that is a Merlin engine in a Spitfire, literally flying over the house. I think you probably enjoyed the Merlin more than the sound of this ticking over. Let's get some cameras set up and go for a drive. Now then, when you start driving this car, the very first thing you need to do is push the button on the steering wheel to turn off the lane departure assistance, because it's really annoying. I understand why lots of modern day cars have it as a safety feature. However, you should be able to turn it off, completely off. Because every time you start the car and you have to get in it and turn it off, it just becomes an annoyance. And honestly, if you're driving a car and you have to have the car warn you when you're leaving your lane and pull you back in again, I question whether you should be driving at all. Anyway, let's put that to one side. A minor gripe of mine. It's not just this car that does that, by the way. It's most modern cars that you get in. Interesting, the Polestar 2 that I drove a couple of months ago, you could turn that off in the main settings, and then it literally stayed off, which was much, much better. So let's start talking through this car. First things first, it's a self-charging hybrid, so there's no plugging in. You just get in it and drive it like a normal car, which I know for many people, you could almost think of this as like a gateway drug, if you like, to full EV, going from a pure internal combustion engine car. So kind of that halfway house, that stepping stone to being a pure EV. You don't need to charge it up. You don't get range anxiety. Worst case scenario is if you run out of petrol, you go to the petrol station and you fill the car up. What you can't do, however, although as it happens, it's currently running on pure EV as an electric vehicle, now the engine's kicked in, the transition between the electric and the engine is super, super smooth. There's no button in here, there's no mode where I can force it to being an electric car. So I guess for me, the first downside, if you compare it to the plug-in hybrid Sorento, is that had a pure EV range of sort of 25 to 30 miles in the real world. You'd plug it in. That means you could drive to the local shops and back as an electric vehicle and never actually use the petrol engine. In this car, that's not the case. You can't really, if you like, choose when it's going to go EV. I've now come into a 30 limit. I came this way on purpose, and the car is now running as a pure electric car. The battery state charge shows me just over half of my battery pack, and I'm running as an EV. I'm being, no polar bears being killed at the moment. But the second I push that throttle a little bit harder or want to accelerate a little bit more, the car will make that decision for me, and it will change me into running as a petrol and electric combination, or just petrol on its own, depending what I'm doing. So yeah, safe to say you'll be in EV mode for town driving, creeping traffic, driving away from your home in the morning. But as soon as you want to push on a little bit, then you're going to drop into hybrid mode. And the car is reasonably pokey, but I need to kind of get this out there right away. This is not a car that you would buy if you were interested in lots of spirited driving. It's really not what it's intended to do. It's not that it isn't nippy, that you can't, overtake stuff and make progress. It's just, it's not a car that you would drive if you were wanting a car purely for the enjoyment of driving, which is kind of one of my primary reasons for buying a car. However, what it is really, really good at is dispatching miles in comfort. It's really, really good at that. The only challenge with pushing on, dispatching miles in comfort, is if you want to do a lot of aggressive accelerating and that kind of thing. For me, the little engine up front, the little 1.6 petrol engine, is found wanting a little bit, especially on these uphill gradients. The car kind of doesn't really know. I mean, can you hear that? It hangs on to the gears a lot. You can change them with the paddles if you want to, just to put the engine out of its misery a little bit. But it does often sound like the car's really struggling in terms of pulling the car along when you want to push on a little bit, especially if there's an uphill gradient. Oh, hello. I'm not going to be keeping up with him. But you can go to the paddles, you can play with the gearbox, but you're not going to be having as much fun as the guy in that Ferrari, that's for sure. But that's not to say it's not a fun car to drive down a twisty road. It's got very good road manners. Again, if I'm comparing to the Sorento, it's just that little bit smaller size. For me and Tracy, it's certainly the size we would prefer. The Sorento was a huge car, big 7-seat SUV. This is that next size down SUV. It's just got that little bit smaller footprint. You can place it more easily on the road. It's just easier in town driving. It's easier when you get to a car park and you want to park it in a car park space. So all in all, it's an easier car to live with. Brakes are pretty good. Clearly, when you put your foot on the brakes, you're recharging the onboard battery. So self-charging hybrid, the name suggests what it does. So in eco mode, you've got a display on the dash that's showing you what cycle the car's in, whether you're powering the car using the engine, whether you're recharging the batteries, which is typically on lift off and on braking, when you're coasting downhill, that type of thing. And the battery typically stays in a state sort of half charge, maybe a little bit more than half charge. I don't think I've ever seen it at full charge, actually. I can only imagine that would happen if you went down a really, really long hill and you were on the brakes all the time. But if you wanted to make a bit more progress, to have a bit more fun, there is dynamic mode. So I can just move this little button here. There's a dramatic change in colours on the instrument binnacle, and I'm now in sport mode. Everything's turned red, and it should be just that little bit more pokey. It doesn't really make a great deal of difference, if I'm honest. It doesn't feel that more sprightly. I've driven this car for much of the time I've had it in eco mode, because that's all I've been doing. It's not a sports car, guys, but it's a brilliant car for dispatching miles, that's for sure. So, what about fuel economy? Plug-in hybrids, the manufacturers of plug-in hybrids quote MPG figures up in the triple figures, 150, 200 miles to the gallon. But they're calculated on one of these WLTP cycles that includes lots of different styles of driving. And in normal conditions, I don't think I've ever had a plug-in hybrid car that's got anywhere near the manufacturer's stated MPG. The Sorento I had, whoa, can you actually see me? God, Ferrari corner again. The Sorento I had, I was getting early 40s in that on a long journey. On short trips into town and back, you could get into three figures because you were running predominantly on the electric engine, on the electric motor. You could force the car into that. This one, you can't force the car into EV, but in terms of fuel economy, it's healthy. I've been averaging kind of 42, 43, 44 miles to the gallon, irrespective of the kind of driving I've been doing, whether that's on a long motorway cruise type journey or on a short journey to the shops. I don't think that's too bad, to be honest. Range-wise, you can get 400 miles to a tank of fuel. You don't have to worry about charging it up when you get to your destination. You don't have to worry about range anxiety, and I like that. I like that a lot. So what do I think of the Tucson self-charging hybrid? It's a very, very impressive car, and I always use Mrs. Petrol as a benchmark. When she first got in the car, a bit of a brand snob, I guess, was like, Hyundai, I'm not sure. And then again, very similar to when we had the Sorento, after she'd been driving it for about an hour, I said, come on then, tell me, what do you think? And she went, this is a really, really good car. I mean, it feels solidly built. This one has a squeaky sunroof, which is a little bit annoying. That's the only thing. And the other thing it has is the sun shade that covers the sunroof is super, super sensitive. You have to hardly touch it, otherwise you open the sunroof, and that's really, really annoying. So, you know, let's get the small annoying things out the way first of all. In terms of living with the car, it's just a brilliant car for what I use 60 to 70% of the time. When I need to do lots of miles to get to a location or to go and, you know, visit friends, it's brilliant. You can sit in here, you can connect your phone, you've got access to all your apps and streaming of music and podcasts. It's super, super comfortable. You've got nice heated and vented seats, and it gives you, you know, 43, 44 miles to the gallon. It's good fuel economy. When you get to a tight and twisty road, I wouldn't suggest it's by any means disappointing, it's just not exciting, and there's a big difference between those two. But I guess this is a family bus, right? You buy this car to move things and stuff around. In terms of money, from 28 to 38,000 pounds, depending on the spec of Tucson you choose, for me that's good money. I think that's a really, really good value proposition for people. You need to look past the badge, and I think Hyundai, with things like the i30N, the new i20N, which I'm very much looking forward to driving at some point in the near future, you know, they're changing people's perceptions of them, I guess much like Skoda did 30 years ago. And I think now they are on people's radar for a good car, a good option as a car. You know, 5-year warranty, good pricing, sensible pricing. The thing I like about them as well, they come with everything on them. You know, there's very little options lists when you buy a Hyundai. They're just basically loaded, and that's one of the ways that they get their pricing down. If you have the small amounts of variance in the manufacturing process, so there aren't like 101 different model ranges, it means you get economies of scale. It means you can make things cheaper, and that means you can pass that on to the end purchaser. So it's a really smart, clever idea. It also means that availability of models is easier. So if you go into a Hyundai dealership and say, I want a Tucson self-charging hybrid, they're all pretty much the kind of same, so they can get access to them much, much more quickly. So yeah, I like it very much. Massive thanks to Hendy Hyundai of Poole. I've been practicing saying that one for the car. I mean, we're in the process of just working out what my next Hendy Ambassador car is going to be, but I should be getting that within the next couple of weeks, I think. So my time with a Tucson is coming to an end very, very shortly, and I've enjoyed it very much. I'd love to know what you think of this car. I know a few of you have reached out and said, when are you going to do the review, Ped, because I've got one on order, or I'm thinking of buying one. Well, if you are thinking of buying one, or you are thinking of going and having a look at one, I would strongly recommend you do, because they're a really, really good car. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. If you have done so, please give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol for plenty more content to come.